ever stood in the center of your own life and felt completely invisible? Have you ever whispered into the silence, "God, why does it feel like everyone's leaving?" Even when you've been patient, even when you've been kind, even when you've loved with everything you have.
Loneliness doesn't announce itself gently. It settles in like winter, cold, heavy, uninvited. And we assume God is taking things from us, stripping our lives bare, leaving us with less and less until we're forgotten. But what if that's not what's happening? What if God isn't removing anything at all? What if He's making room? This is a story about loneliness, purpose, and what happens when God clears the noise so your heart can hear what really matters. Stay with me until the end, because if you're walking through a quiet season right now, this story might give you the hope you've been searching for.
In a small mountain town where fog settled low in the mornings and the air smelled like pine and cold earth, there lived a man named David. He wasn't ambitious, wasn't chasing success or recognition. He was a stonemason, a man who built walls, laid foundations, carved gravestones when the town needed them. His hands were calloused and scarred, his back bent slightly from decades of lifting heavy stones. But David had never complained, because for years his life had been full in the ways that mattered most. His wife, Grace, had been the kind of woman who made a small house feel like a kingdom. She sang while washing dishes, she laughed at his quiet jokes. She believed in him, even when he doubted himself. Their son, Caleb, had been energetic and curious, always running through the fields, always asking questions about God and the world and why things worked the way they did. Together, they shared simple meals at a table David had built with his own hands. They prayed together before bed. They dreamed humble dreams, and David thanked God often, not for wealth or status, but for enough warmth, enough love, enough to feel whole. But seasons change, and life doesn't ask permission. One winter, Grace grew ill. Not suddenly, just a slow fading, like a candle running out of wax. David stayed beside her through endless nights. He held her hand. He whispered prayers from memory. Sometimes he begged God to heal her. Sometimes he just asked God not to leave them. When Grace passed away on a gray morning, the house became unbearably quiet. David wept alone, face buried in his hands, asking God why something so beautiful had to end so painfully. But in that grief, beneath the crushing weight of loss, something stirred. A presence, not comforting in the way he wanted, but real, as if God was quietly reminding him, "I haven't left." The silence was painful, but it wasn't empty. After Grace died, David seemed to age overnight. His hands trembled more when he worked. His shoulders sagged under invisible weight. But he kept going. He kept building. He kept praying. He believed God gives you strength for today, not for tomorrow, so he only asked for today. When Caleb grew up, he left for the city, promised to visit, and for a while he did. He'd come home with stories and laughter that briefly filled the silence again. But over time, those visits became shorter, then less frequent. Then they stopped. David ate dinner alone now. He listened to the wind outside. He sat in the chair Grace used to sit in and felt the weight of absence pressing down on him. Some nights, the loneliness was so heavy he could barely breathe. He'd sit in the dark and whisper, "God, is this really all that's left?" But every morning, without fail, he woke before sunrise, washed his face in cold water, lit a small lamp, folded his rough hands, and thanked God for one more day. He never asked God to remove the loneliness. He only asked to still be useful. So David kept working. He repaired broken fences for neighbors who couldn't afford to pay him. He carved small crosses and left them at the church. He tended a small vegetable garden behind his house, finding peace in the rhythm of planting and watering. Children from the town would sometimes wander by. David always welcomed them. He gave them fruit, told them stories about his work, listened carefully to their small problems, believing God listens to every heart the same way, no matter how young or old. People in town wondered why he gave so much when he had so little. David would simply say, being alone and being empty aren't the same thing. One summer afternoon, Caleb returned unexpectedly, but he looked different, worn out, anxious. He watched his father work, watched him serve neighbors, watched him give away strength he barely had left. Finally, Caleb said, "Dad, why are you still doing this? Nobody's going to remember. You should rest." David looked at his son with calm, tired eyes. "Caleb," he said gently, "God hasn't forgotten me, and as long as I can give, I'm not empty." Caleb didn't understand. To him, being alone meant something had gone wrong. A full life meant being surrounded by people, by noise, by proof that you mattered, not quiet acts nobody would ever notice. That same evening, a homeless man knocked on David's door, asked for food, maybe a place to sleep for the night. David didn't hesitate. He fed the man, gave him a blanket, sat with him by the fire. Before the man left the next morning, he placed a hand on David's shoulder and said, "God will repay your kindness when you need it most." Caleb heard the words, but he didn't feel their weight yet. Months passed. David's health began to fail. His steps grew slower, his breath shorter. Some nights the loneliness returned like a flood, and he wept freely. But instead of becoming bitter, David prayed harder, trusted deeper, believed God was shaping something in him he couldn't see yet. Then, one brutal winter, he collapsed, too weak to stand, too weak to cook or care for himself. When word spread through the town, something unexpected happened. People began arriving. Neighbors brought soup and firewood. The children he'd listened to sat beside his bed, reading to him, keeping him company. Men he'd helped over the years stood outside, shoveling snow, fixing things around the house. Lying in that bed, surrounded by faces and voices, David finally understood. None of his kindness had been wasted. God had been storing it all.
Caleb rushed home when he heard. When he walked into the house and saw how many people had come to care for his father, something broke open inside him. He sat beside the bed, tears streaming down his face. "Dad," he whispered, "you were never alone." David smiled weakly. "God doesn't take love away, son. He just redirects it." When David recovered enough to move, Caleb begged him to come live in the city. He was terrified of losing him, terrified of leaving him isolated again. David prayed about it and felt peace. City life was overwhelming at first, loud, crowded. David felt isolated even in the noise. But then one day, Caleb took him to a community center that helped struggling families. They needed someone who could teach basic carpentry, someone who could listen without judgment. David felt tears fill his eyes. He knew God had answered again. He started teaching young men how to build. He repaired broken furniture for families who couldn't afford new. He sat with people who felt invisible and made them feel seen. They called him Mr. David with reverence and warmth. His heart felt fuller than it had in years. Years later, when David passed away peacefully in his sleep, the memorial service overflowed. Children, neighbors, strangers whose lives he'd touched without even knowing it. Caleb stood there, finally understanding. His father's lonely years hadn't been punishment, they'd been preparation. God had been clearing space so David's heart could expand, so his love could reach people he never would have met otherwise. And that's the truth we need to hear. When God makes you lonely, He's not abandoning you, He's reshaping you. He removes the noise so you can hear His voice clearly. He empties your hands so you have room to carry what He's about to give you. He clears the room so your heart has space to grow wider than it ever could when it was crowded. Loneliness isn't always rejection. Sometimes it's redirection.
If you're walking through a silent season right now, if people have drifted away, if your life feels smaller than it used to, maybe God is making room for something you couldn't hold before. Maybe He's preparing you for a purpose bigger than you can see yet. The love you give through God is never wasted. It doesn't evaporate. It doesn't disappear into nothing. It moves. It multiplies. It finds new places to live. So don't fear the quiet. Don't fear the empty rooms. Don't fear the seasons when everyone seems to walk away. God hasn't forgotten you. He's just clearing space. Trust Him in the silence, because sometimes the loneliest seasons grow the most faithful hearts. And when the time comes, when God opens the door you didn't even know you were waiting for, you'll look back and realize every lonely moment was building toward this.